On this episode of Living with a Classic, I'll show you how you can turn your cam covers and other details in your engine bay from this to this. Welcome back to Living with a Classic, and if you're new to my channel, I hope you stick around and consider subscribing. I put new videos every week on some Jaguar and classic car related content. In today's video, it's all about making that engine bay look a lot nicer. So now the engine is basically back together, the head's back on, all that's been cleaned up. I've cleaned out the rest of the engine bay. I don't want to bolt back on rusty fasteners or cam covers are peeling or just rusty things. So I will show you how you can make parts of your engine bay look brand new by just using some degreaser, some sandpaper, and some spray cans. So let's start. The first step is to thoroughly degrease everything and clean it, get any old grease and dirt off. I used some mineral spirit and some brake clean and a soft brush, and I was able to get all of it off. Now it's over here on the bench and it's already looking a lot nicer. There's no oil on there anymore, but it still needs to get repainted because it's starting to chip everywhere. Last person who painted it, I don't know, there's a little bit of a run there, and yeah, it's peeling everywhere. So first thing I'm going to do is just get a blade here and get that old sticker off. I will be replacing it with a new one. And then I don't really plan on getting all the paint off, just where it's bubbling and chipping. I'm going to get the paint off there and anywhere it comes off easily. Where it's stuck on there nicely, I'm just going to scuff it up so that the new primer and paint will stick on. Between the ribs, I can see that's kind of lifting a lot and there's a lot of bubbles over here. So I'm going to start with a screwdriver and just try and scrape out any loose paint and debris in here. So I've scraped out anything that was loose here. Actually, it wasn't that loose, just in some places, but at least that's scraped away. Now I can start sanding. I'm going to start with some 120 paper, just to get some of the rough parts out. And then switch over to 400 to smooth everything over. So there's nothing really to it, just some sandpaper, and just start getting off any loose paint. The key to any painting is basically that 90% is preparation. If you degrease everything, clean it up, get out any old runs, make sure everything is nice and smooth, you will get a good result. The paint will look really nice. But if you rush this part and don't spend enough time and don't get everything out, you will be disappointed by the results. So spend some time sanding it, getting everything looking the way you want, and then painting it will be easy. When you want to try and sand inside the ribs, you can take your sandpaper, just fold it a few times, and you can push it between the ribs. You'll be able to sand out most of the old paint. So now this part is ready for paint. I've sanded everything with 400 grit also. Just need to blow it off with some compressed air and then wipe it down. So I'm going to sand and prepare the other pieces as well. Then I'll bring everything over to my other workshop and then we'll start painting. So everything is thoroughly degreased now and cleaned off and ready for paint. I'm in the other workshop where I usually keep the XJS. I've moved that somewhere else just because this space is a lot smaller. There's nothing else around here. It doesn't really matter if I get oversprayed or anything. It's really easy to clean out. Also, the space is smaller so I can more easily heat it up. So I've had a heater in here for a few hours. It's pretty nice and warm and you want some good heat when you paint. So I'm going to start with a primer. Get a good coat and good coverage of that. Let it thoroughly cure and then we're going to have a top coat of some nice satin black. But first, the primer. So I always start with a light dust coat first. A nice even dust coat on everything. It doesn't have to get really pretty the first time, you just want a nice thin coat. Now the thin dust coat has flashed off and I can put on a thicker coat of primer. Now I have a nice even coat, so I'm going to let this primer cure, and then we'll have a nice satin black top coat. But actually it looks pretty cool in this kind of whitish gray. Pretty cool actually, but we're going for satin black. Now the primer is all dry and ready for some satin black. Just like before, I'm going to start with a really thin coat. Just a dust coat over everything. When that has almost cured, I will start with a first real coat. Now that coat is dry, I can put on the first real coat. There are no real special tricks to this, just don't put too much paint on at once because it will run. Keep the can at a pretty even distance to what you're painting, and basically just take your time. Every single can that you have, different makes, they will spray a little differently, so you might want to try out the first one you get a little bit. Otherwise, just be patient and you will get surprisingly good results. Now they've cured overnight, and don't they look great? I really like the satin finish. It's not too shiny, it's not too dull. I think it's going to look great. But I still need to sand down the top here so that the top of the ribs are nice and shiny and still black in between here. And then I have a new sticker to go on here. So I'm going to start sanding down this one now, and let's see what that looks like. To get this all nice and shiny, I'm going to use various grits of sandpaper, starting with pretty rough. So I have some, this is 60 paper right here. I'm going to start with that, get the paint off, and then when I get down to the metal, I'll use finer and finer sandpaper, like 180, 400, and then lastly I have 1200, just to make it really nice and smooth. You can use just a block like this. However, when I did that before, I found that these are not completely flat. So as you notice, it basically only takes the tops here, because the whole thing is a little concave. That often happens when this has been tightened. If a previous owner has over tightened it, the whole thing could go down here a bit. Sometimes they can even crack. This one is thankfully not cracked, nor is the other one. But then I found it's just easier to take a piece of paper, fold it in half in my hand. So I'll start with this rough one now and get off all the paint. A few minutes later, and it's starting to look like this. It comes off pretty easily, and since I'm not going very deep down into the metal below, the coarse paper doesn't really scratch at all, it just takes off the paint. However, I want to be a little careful over here. I want to have a nice edge there, so I'm just going to put a little bit of masking tape right along the edge here, just so I don't scuff up the paint up here by mistake. So I'm just going to continue now. Once I have all of this off, I will switch to some finer paper and get a nice polished finish. A small trick to get a nice even finish here is to use a razor blade. So you can cut down into the paint right along here, and then you can just push up the paint. And now that's most of it off. The rest I can get off with some light sandpaper. And for the magic of editing, they're both now done. So I worked all the way down to 1200 paper, and I think they came out really great. I think they look fantastic. But there is one final touch. A new sticker. See if I can get this on here straight. And now doesn't that look fantastic? Here's everything that's been painted so far, and I think it's going to make a huge difference to the overall appearance underneath the hood. So this is in satin black, as you know, polished up here, new sticker. That's also in satin black, that as well. The inlet manifold is also in satin black. And this is the back of the air filter, which I decided to do in a more glossy black. And the rest of the airbox and some other parts around the engine is also going to be in this glossy black. But I still need to paint those, so you will get to see all of this when it's back on the car. And that's it for today's episode. I don't know about you, but I'm very happy with the results. I think it looks fantastic. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And it doesn't take very long at all and hardly costs anything. So over the course of a weekend and I don't know, maybe 20 bucks or so, you can get your engine bay looking gorgeous and almost brand new. So I can't wait to fit all these things, but I will fit them and I'll show you what everything looks like when it's all back on the engine in a future episode. Getting closer and closer starting this thing up. So now with everything painted, I'm going to start bolting everything back on with new gaskets. And then pretty soon we can turn that key. So if you like this video, please hit that like button, share it with your friends. If you're not already subscribed, I highly recommend that you do if you like this kind of videos. And until next time, I'm Adam, and this was Living with a Classic. I'll see you soon.